Okay, hello, welcome back to IB Chemistry. Right now we're IB Chem, and this is both in an SL and the HL unit. We're just finishing up right now Unit 5.3, and today what we're going to be discussing is we're going to be discussing the ozone layer. Uh, the ozone layer and what occurs in the ozone layer. So if you look at your syllabus, this is part of your international mindedness right here, and basically just talks about the concerns that we have, right? The ozone layer is critical to life on Earth, and humans kind of, I wouldn't say take it for granted, but didn't fully understand it before we started destroying it. So now, of course, we've banned a lot of the chemicals that we know affect the ozone layer, but but still it's something that we need to keep in mind in our everyday lives. Otherwise, we could see some, bad health effects coming from the ozone layer, or coming from the depletion of the ozone layer. Uh, so basically, the ozone layer exists in the stratosphere. So it exists in the stratosphere, which is right above our atmosphere that we live and breathe in. Uh, and the ozone layer, this is, I'll write it down, this is where the ozone layer, uh, uh, where the ozone layer is in. So ozone is in the stratosphere. And what the ozone does is ozone and oxygen, what they do is they protect the Earth from harmful UV radiation. Harmful UV radiation. And we're going to talk about how that occurs today. We're going to talk about how it protects the Earth from harmful UV radiation. Because it's just like we've said before, we looked at bond enthalpies, right? Bond enthalpies. So if we looked at the bond enthalpy of O2, it's about 498 kilojoules per mole. But what we can also look at is we can look at the formula for light. E equals hv is we've got Planck's constant, we've got the frequency of light and the energy of light. So the energy of light is proportional to the frequency of light. So if we've got a high frequency light, high frequency means high energy, and high frequency equals a smaller wavelength. And if we were to look at a spectrum, we'd see, we'd see our visible light, we'll see UV, then we'll see extreme UV, we'll see EUV, we'll see UV, then we're going to see X-ray radiation, then we're going to see gamma ray radiation, and if we go left, we're going to start to see IR, we're going to see NIR, near infrared, we're going to see FIR, far infrared, and then we're going to get into our our microwaves, our radio waves. So there's a whole spectrum of energy. Basically, it's all of this is different wavelength, and wavelength is proportional to frequency, and frequency is proportional to energy. Therefore, wavelength is proportional to energy. It's inversely proportional to energy. We don't really need to know how it is, but we just need to know that shorter wavelength means a higher frequency, and a higher frequency means a higher energy. So what the important thing to take out of all this mumbling that I'm doing right now is just to know that the UV radiation is within the energy of chemical bonds, of some chemical bonds, not all. So it's within the energy of some chemical bonds. So lucky for us, it's within this energy of O2, in which we have an abundance of on the Earth, and O3, which we get from the ozone cycle in the stratosphere. So I'm going to change colors because this is just looking like one big wall of text. But basically, the UV radiation energy is similar to the energy contained in the bond of an O2 molecule, and similar to the energy contained within the bonds of an O3 molecule. And this is how we protect the Earth. This is how not we protect the Earth, this is how nature protects the Earth. We're the ones tending to not protect the Earth. We're doing the opposite. So let's look at this just so that you guys know exactly where we're talking about in the atmosphere. I've got a few things saved. So we've got the troposphere is where we exist right now, and the ozone layer exists within the stratosphere, which is within the next, basically within the next layer of the atmosphere. And this layer, it's crucial to protecting life on Earth. So it's crucial to protecting life on Earth because it's crucial just because UV radiation, which I'm sure you know about, we've got UVA and UVB radiation. It's harmful to biological species. So it's harmful to biological species. So what that means is that UV radiation, basically for humans, it affects our genes, it affects our DNA, and basically can cause health effects, and it's profound health effects too. So what I mean by this is that at UV radiation, like you guys have seen, you go into the sun and you get sunburn. That's not that bad, right? That's not that bad. But sunburn leads to melanomas, which are basically small pockets of skin cancer. And with severe sunburn, we can actually cause skin cancer. And as we all know, skin cancer is a profound effect. Any type of bodily cancer is a profound effect and can change our lives entirely. And also UV radiation can cause cataracts, which basically cause blind spots in our vision. So we can't see as well. And as we all know, our eyes are crucial to everyday life. So UV radiation, bad UV radiation, or all UV radiation, affects our bodies in negative ways. So I'm just going to erase this off because I need to make a little bit more real estate on my screen. But it affects our body in lots of ways. So that's why we need this O2 and O3 in order to protect our bodies. And protect all living animals on the earth, right? We're not the only one with tissues. If you imagine, plants have tissues too. All animals have tissues. It's crucial to protect life on Earth as we know it. So let's look at the reactions a little bit. So let's look at the reactions that we can undergo. We can undergo the reaction, and it's basically the decomposition of oxygen under UV light. So under UV light, oxygen forms 2 oxygen, and remember the dot means a radical. And an important thing to point out is that the oxygen, it's a di-radical. So there's actually 2 unpaired electrons, and that occurs because there's a double bond between the oxygen. So when a strong UV radiation comes in, what it causes is these 2 electrons on the right to go back to the right oxygen, and these 2 electrons on the left to go to the left oxygen. So what we get left with is we get 2 oxygen with 2 paired electrons, and then 2 radical species, 2 radical unpaired electrons that want to bond. So with these wanting to bond, it's a reactive, very reactive species. So it's a very reactive species. So the next reaction that we see is that we take these oxygen radicals. This one, we don't draw it like a diradical. We draw it like this, just showing that it's a radical. So the next reaction is that we take this oxygen radical and it reacts with further oxygen in the air in order to form O3. So what occurs there is that we've got an oxygen-oxygen double bond with some electrons. And remember, we've got 2 oxygen radicals on this one and 2 lone pairs. Yeah, 2 lone pairs. So what occurs is basically that this one forms a dative bond. He donates his electrons here, and these go to form a lone pair onto the side. So our final structure looks like this. He has 3, he has 1, and he has 2, and we've got a stable O3 structure. So the first step, right, is initiation. This is what we call initiation. And initiation is the formation of a radical. And this step down here, where the radical disappears, we call this termination. But it won't be back, right? Termination. That's a Terminator joke if you didn't get that. It will not be back. So termination is where the radical gets destroyed, basically. So it's where it terminates, where it ends itself, and the formation of O3 is where it ends itself. So let's look at. I'm just going to erase this up here. We don't really need this purple part at the top either. So let's look at both of these. Let's look at oxygen. So we said oxygen, the bond enthalpy of oxygen was 498 kilojoules per mole. And the bond enthalpy of ozone was 364 kilojoules per mole. And both of these are within the energy of UV radiation. So it's within the energy of UV radiation. So what occurs, right? This is what takes away. This is what absorbs UV radiation, and it absorbs it to initiate a radical reaction. So it absorbs it and turns UV radiation, turns energy into chemical energy. It turns it, it absorbs it and it converts it into a different type of energy. So what we have there, let me just try to erase this, this is the absorption, and it's a cycle that occurs, is that since this too, O3 is within the range of UV energy, what we see that O2 breaks up under UV to form 2 oxygen radicals, and then this oxygen radical reacts with O2 to form O3, but then this O3 decomposes under UV light to form O2 and an oxygen radical. And this oxygen radical can move over, attack another O2, and form an O3. And then this O3 decomposes under UV light to form O2 and an oxygen radical. So we can see this is why we call it the ozone cycle. Is it works in one way to absorb energy, and it absorbs energy in the other way to convert back to its original product. But now we need to discuss something that humans have made that we probably shouldn't have made, but right, we never really know the effects of things until we have time to study them. Like you see right now, right? Right now is the coronavirus time. And right, they can't just release something, release some sort of cure, release some sort of vaccine without testing it, because we don't know the long-term effects. That's why vaccines and stuff usually take a long time. So it's the same thing for this damage to the ozone. Is we were making these chemicals called CFCs that were refrigerants. They had the properties that we needed for refrigerants. We use them in our cars. We use them in refrigerators. We use them as aerosols. So we use them for a lot of different purposes, right? We just had a can, and we just compressed CFCs into there in order to carry something out. When we sprayed it, we just spray it freely into the atmosphere, and there's no effects on it. Doesn't have profound effects on human health. It doesn't have profound effects in our portion of the atmosphere. But the thing is that once these CFCs travel up to the stratosphere, it's the same thing as those what we would have done in IGCSE chemistry. We would have done the halogenation of alkanes. So remember, we had something like CH4 plus Cl2 under UV light would form CH3Cl plus HCl. So right, we'd halogenate an alkane because chlorine and halogens are reactive under UV light. And then now we've got something called a CFC. CFC, it's called I'll change the color. It's called a chlorofluorocarbon. So an example of that would be CF2Cl2. It would look like this, FFClCl. So you've got difluoro, methane. So difluoromethane. And the unfortunate part, let me just erase all this stuff at the top. Is that the energy of the CFC bond, so the energy of the CCl bond in the CFCs is proportional to UV radiation. And that's a bad thing, right? Because it absorbs UV radiation and forms radicals. And what happens is that when radicals come in contact with radicals, so a radical plus a radical and a radical react together to terminate. And we've got, in our atmosphere, we've got all these O radicals, and we need these. These are crucial. We really, 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 we need these. We don't need these chlorine radicals. We have no use for them in the atmosphere, because what we need is ozone and oxygen. Anything else we put in there is going to affect the natural process, and the natural process that has been protecting our Earth for thousands, millions of years. So let's look at that. I have it saved on the other screen. We're going to look at the reaction cycle. But the important thing that I want you to know is these chlorofluorocarbons, they act as catalysts for the decomposition of ozone. And the important word to look at here is that it acts as a catalyst, right? The catalysts, they are involved in the reaction, but they are not used up in the end. So basically, these CFC, this chlorine radical is going to go in. It's going to it's going to show up to the party. It's going to trash the entire house. It's just going to light the whole house on fire, destroy the entire ozone layer, then it's just going to leave the exact same way it came and be like, oh, where are we going to next? Where's the next house we're going to destroy? And that's what they do. That's how they act as catalysts, right? They go in the same way. They mess with the natural process of the stratosphere, and then they're regenerated in the end. So this is why, let me just erase this in the bottom, this is why a small amount, let me just turn in red because this is bad, a small amount of CFCs in the stratosphere has a huge effect on the ozone cycle, because they're regenerated every single time it goes through and destroys a process. It gets regenerated at the end, and then it says, okay, well, let's go screw up another process. Let's go mess up this O3. I don't like how he looks, right? So this is all, I'm going to try to just get a bigger thing to erase. So we're going to look at, on the other slide, I've got this cycle, and it's a cycle we should, I don't believe that we need to memorize it, but we should be aware of. So let's go to that. Let's go right here. So CFCs. This is the cycle that we're looking at right on the right-hand side. So these CFCs, the UV light comes in and breaks this bond and forms this chlorine radical. And this is the way that I say it. It causes things to mess up, because the chlorine radical then reacts with ozone to form a chloro-oxygen radical and liberate O2, and then those react together, basically just to neutralize it. Right? As we said, when radicals react together, they terminate. So it's terminated, and once it terminates, it regenerates. It forms a stable structure. It regenerates O2. So basically, like, these bonds start to break. The chlorine and oxygen bonds break, and they terminate themselves. We don't need to know this entire cycle, but the important thing that we have to know is that chlorine is regenerated, right? Chlorine gets fed back in, so if we increase this concentration, we're going to have a lot of chlorine in the atmosphere decomposing all of the ozone. And when we decompose all of the ozone, we're not going to be blocking out all of those harmful UV rays that ozone absorbs. So right, ozone just gets regenerated, or chlorine radicals get regenerated every single time, regenerated, and the cycle doesn't end. That's why it just acts as a catalyst. So that's the most important part. So let's just summarize what we did today, and then we'll end the video for today. So the ozone cycle, this is the important part. Ozone cycle is in the stratosphere. So the ozone cycle is in the stratosphere. O2 and O3 absorb harmful UV radiation, and CFCs deplete ozone in the atmosphere through a catalytic process. And that just means that the chlorine radicals are regenerated in the end. So chlorine radicals are regenerated in the end. So when they're regenerated, it means that they stick in the atmosphere. They maintain. What we can hope for is that the chlorine radical reacts with the chlorine radical to form chlorine gas, but then chlorine gas reacts under UV light to form chlorine radicals. So there's no way to remove them from the atmosphere, from the stratosphere. Even through termination, they will again absorb UV light and then regenerate again into chlorine radicals to again destroy more O3. And by destroying O3, so less O3, let me just go to more red. So less O3 means that more harmful radiation reaches us, reaches the surface of the Earth. So more harmful radiation reaches the surface of the Earth. So what we see then is we see increased melanomas, increased skin cancer, increased cataracts, and increased, we'll just say, damage to organic life. So not even trees are free of getting damaged from UV radiation. So okay, I hope this was helpful. My next video, we're going to solve a bunch of questions together, so tune in for that. Thank you.